Jesus. Live from Vision, it's Sunday morning. Thank you for that. Namaste. The divine in me honors the divine in you. Take a breath and let it out. Am I the only one who finds my shoulders have been up around my earlobes this week? What a crazy time. But in recognition of Women's Month, Herstory, I love that, thank you. We're celebrating the contributions of women, both notable and ordinary, and we're honoring the divine feminine, the positive expression of that feminine side that is found in each and every one of us, regardless of gender. It's something that can be experienced. It can't be seen, but it can be felt. And the divine feminine is a healing force beyond our physical world. And I was thinking, with the perceived threats of political discord and climate change and coronavirus, who couldn't benefit from a healing force from beyond the physical world, right? So I want to share some stories with you this morning. And there may be one or two of you thinking, stories in church, that seems kind of a strange place for stories, but I was thinking, hey, it worked for Jesus. So Wonder Woman first caught 4-year-old John's eye when he was in a toy store, and he spies this rack of DC superhero girls' dolls. And he goes home and he tells his grandma, I love Superwoman. I love Wonder Woman. I love her costume. And he asked her if she would conjure up her superpowers, and would his grandmother make him a costume for this theme day at the Six Flags park. It was a dress-up day. And so she didn't have any pattern. She didn't really know what she was doing, kind of shooting from the hip. Took her a couple of weeks, but finally this EVA foam masterpiece came together, and she presented him with this costume, and he was so beside himself. He put it on and he ran around his house going, I'm Wonder Woman, I'm Wonder Woman. And in case you're wondering how the theme day went, he wore it to theme day, and he actually got to meet his idol. And there was this wonderful picture of him standing beside his other Wonder Woman, and this grin was just from ear to ear. And I was thinking, what's the moral of this? And it's, I think that everyone, boys need a superhero, female superhero, as much as girls do. That we all could benefit from a female superhero, whether it's in the political office, the box office, the post office, anywhere, And I thought, well, Wonder Woman is a start. And we are beginning to see more female role models, I think, than maybe in times past. But recently, Greg and I were having a conversation with another couple, young couple, over dinner, and I asked them in preparation for this, I was like, well, so who can you think of in terms of women that are notable and quotable? And I have to tell you, it was pretty discouraging because their list was like one or two people. And so I looked up some lists, and I'm going to share with you just a few. There was a list of the top 100 women who shaped history. And of course, this is history in the world. And of course, number one on the list, it's kind of hard to knock her from the top, would be Mother Mary. Obviously, the best known in history. But how about Madame Curie? She was the one who coined the phrase, radioactive. And she went on to win not one, but 2 Nobel Prizes. Not the first woman, the first person to win 2 Nobel Prizes in different categories. Rosa Parks sparked the civil rights movement by not giving up her seat to someone, a white person. Florence Nightingale, one of my heroes, somebody who changed the face of how we see nursing and healthcare. There was actually more people who died in the Crimean War from disease than from wounds up until that time. Amelia Earhart, pretty cool, right? First woman to solo across the Atlantic and later became legendary because of her disappearance in her attempt to fly around the world. Mother Teresa, an Albanian Roman Catholic nun who changed the lives of the most vulnerable around the world. And how many of you know the name Sybil Ludington? The 16-year-old who rode twice as far as Paul Revere to let people know the British are coming, the British are coming. And she actually did get credit later from George Washington. Obviously, there were more, and now we have today's influencers. We have Oprah, and we have Ellen, we have Michelle Obama, and Serena, and Venus Williams, Wonder Woman. The current Doctor Who. Any Doctor Who fans in here? I love Doctor Who. Lady Gaga, Billie Eilish. Time Magazine's Person of the Year, Greta Thunberg. Yeah. And what about the ordinary women who shaped your life, my life, our history? The mothers, the grandmothers, the aunts, the sisters, the daughters. Let me tell you a little bit about my mom. Because for me, as a little girl, I recall that most female role models were either damsels in distress who needed rescuing or June Cleaver type. And for those of you under 40 watching, Google Leave It to Beaver. But for me, I found a role model for being a woman, and even the divine feminine in the people who were closest to me. My mom, she was a supreme healer. She was the neighborhood nurse. She was the go-to mom for any splinter, any skinned knee. How many of you in here are old enough to remember mercurochrome? Oh. I think that was a little passive-aggressive, don't you think? Bee stings and poison ivy. And I remember when me and my little sister, my little brother, we were about 6, 4, and 2. We all got chicken pox at the same time. That may have been planned in hindsight. But anyway, she lines us up, naked as jaybirds, arms in the air, and with a bucket of calamine lotion and a paintbrush, painted us like a picket fence. Her healing power extended to dogs and cats and birds and bunnies and snakes and lizards and bugs and slugs. And she found her love in the night sky, the love of God. She loved the moon and the first star of the evening, which technically was a planet, and falling stars. And she was an amateur astronomer, but she was a serious amateur astronomer. She had a telescope. I didn't realize at the time how outlandish this was. The telescope, honestly, the lens was this big around and it was so heavy it took 2 men to move it. But she would take us as small children all the way to St. Louis, Missouri, which was a 2-hour drive from my little hometown of Hannibal, so that we could take classes on Saturday afternoons at the planetarium. And in the evenings, she would lay out blankets on the soft clover of our yard. And at night, she would guide us through the constellations, the Big Dipper, to the Little Dipper, to my favorite, because it was so easy to find, Orion. Her love for the sky also manifested in a very unique career, especially for a woman in small-town mid-America. She literally took to the sky. Now, unlike Superman, she did need an airplane, but boy, did she fly. She became, when I was 12 years old, she became a pilot. And she went on to get her instrument flight rating, her multi-engine rating. She flew charter. She flew air ambulance. And then she went on to become an instructor herself. Now, do you ever remember sitting on the edge of the nest, being encouraged by your parents, or maybe kicked out, to go out on your own? Maybe the first time you drove a car, or the first time you flew an airplane. Some mothers taught their kids to drive. My mom taught me how to fly. I'll never forget the summer day. She takes me out for takeoffs and landings. They're called touch and goes. And we do that for about an hour. Touch and go, touch and go. And then when we land, she said, stop the plane for a moment. And she stopped. I pulled it to a stop. And she gets out of the plane. I said, where are you going? And she goes, you're ready to fly. You'll be fine. I was like, I'm going to die. But she encouraged me to go, and I took off, and I landed. And when I landed, she was standing there like a proud mama bird, and I get out of the plane. She comes over, gives me this big hug, pulls out a pair of scissors, and cuts off the tail of my shirt, and proceeds to pin it on a wall in the terminal with all of the other shirt tails of pilots commemorating their first solo. By the time I was 16 years old, she had mastered acrobatics. That's right, my mom could beat up your mom. I still remember the first time she took me up in an acrobatic plane. There's 2 seats. She's in the front, I'm in the back. It's a little 2-seater, just like you would picture. Glass canopy overhead, throttle stick between our legs, only thing missing, Snoopy goggles. She takes me up, and we're doing loops and rolls. We're flying upside down, and I'm watching the countryside of green pastures through the canopy of the plane. So cool. And then as her last procedure, she takes me up into a procedure called a hammerhead. Now, if you're not familiar with what that is, she pulls the throttle straight back, and we go up, 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 up. And then she turns off the engine. She did not tell me about that part. We silently come down to the earth, spinning, watching the earth circle round and round. And I can remember what I was thinking. Have I done anything to tick this woman off? But I remember after we landed thinking, she's the bravest person I've ever met. Many people see women as soft and vulnerable and consider them the weaker sex. My image of a woman was someone beautiful and smart, gentle and strong, graceful and brave. Ernest Holmes said that life is androgynous, containing within itself both male and female factors. The feminine and masculine are from one principle, and I love this part. All come from the one, will return to the one, are all now in the one, and will forever remain in the one. Back of all manifestation must be the desire to create, the urge to express. And this is called the divine urge. Author Dennis Merritt Jones said, "Infinite presence as the divine feminine is unconditional love." I love that. Divine feminine is an omnipresent principle with equal access across the gender spectrum. And it requires becoming more vulnerable. And because of that, some people, particularly some men, see that vulnerability as weakness. Even use it to be derogatory to others. You're acting like a little girl. You're being a sissy. But divine feminine, it's only in light of that vulnerability that authentic love fully reveals itself. And fortunately, not all men are afraid to show their feminine side, their divine feminine, the yin, the yang. I watched firsthand the divine feminine combined with the masculine the first time I watched my son cradle his autistic little boy in his arms with unconditional love and patience. Or when my husband, your tenor, Greg, would curl up in bed at night with his little boy and read to them until they both fell asleep. Happy birthday, sweets. Or when my dad would play the tickle game. It was the same game night after night, and my siblings and I, we never tired of this game. He worked long hours. He often came home from work after we'd already finished dinner. We're getting ready for bed, and then we hear the front door open, and we hear him come through, stomp, stomp. And in this deep, grumbly voice, he says, "Where are my children? Where could they be?" He'd walk in and he'd say, "They're not in the living room." And we're back hiding under this bed, all piled in the same bed, under the same blanket, wiggling and giggling. And he'd come down the hallway. "They're not in the bathroom. Where could they be?" "They're not in the hallway. They're not in the kitchen." He'd come into the bedroom where we're all hiding and squiggling and giggling and laughing, and he'd look at the bedroom, and then he'd plop down on the bed on top of us and say, "I've looked everywhere. Where could they be?" And then he'd turn over and go, "Tickle, tickle, tickle, tickle," ah! Until we were absolutely exhausted with laughter and with love and delight. Oh my gosh. So what? In your life, wouldn't you like to experience the balance, the wholeness, the ability to create, the ability to manifest, the ability to love unconditionally? While meditating on the lesson for today, creating the divine feminine, a word appeared to me, combining the feminine and the divine that is in each and every one of us. And that word is feminamiste. The divine feminine in me honors the divine feminine in you. Feminamaste. It's kind of fun to say. Feminamaste. Try it. Feminamaste. Awesome. Now, turn to your neighbor, look into their eyes, and say to them simply, Feminamaste. Feminamaste. Feminamaste.
Namaste.
Let me tell you one more story about my mom and how she gave me the greatest gift ever. I remember I was 10 years old, lying on a blanket one night with my mom. We're gazing at the stars, and she says, Karyn, can you find Orion by yourself? I said, sure, that's easy, and I pointed to it. And she said, good, because when I die, that's where I'm going to be hanging out, and you'll always be able to find me. And I remember thinking at the time that was very far away. But now that she's gone, wherever I travel, it doesn't matter where, all I have to do is look up into the night sky. And I see her. I find her. And I talk to her. An interesting epilogue to this story happened just yesterday. I was watching Morgan Freeman in the documentary on Netflix, The Story of God. Now, how many of you are hearing Morgan Freeman say, the story of God? Yeah. It turns out that the constellation of Orion was an integral part of the creation story for the Mayans. I thought that was fascinating. So it seems to me, between my mom hanging out there and the fact that the Mayans have included this constellation into their creation, that I think it's really the manifestation of the divine feminine. And I invite you to join me in using Orion as a touchstone to the divine feminine at any time. And while you're there, say hi to my mom. Despite the perceived chaos vying for our attention right now, with the help of the divine feminine, we will continue to create, to manifest, to love. And it seems to me the way through all of this discord right now, the political discord, the climate change, the coronavirus, is not to power through it, but instead to call upon the divine feminine. Because of the coronavirus, we as persons may experience some social distance, but spirit knows no distance. This is the time to reach out not with hands, but with heart. Let us reach out with compassion. Let us reach out with unconditional love. Let us see the divine feminine in all. Feminamaste.